Hi everyone, I'm Stan Mallow. Welcome to Paranormal Yakker. My guest in today's show, a paranormal investigator, Theresa Argie, who is also known far and wide as the Haunted Housewife, and Eric Olsen, an outstanding journalist in the field of paranormal investigations. I'll be talking with them about America's Most Haunted, the secrets of famous paranormal places, the book they co-authored that gives you, the reader, a chance to tour America's most famous haunted places from the comfort of your own home. Theresa Argie and Eric Olsen, welcome to Paranormal Yakker.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Nice to be with you.
I'm sure, Theresa, there has to be a backstory about when and how it came about that you became the haunted housewife. Could you share that backstory?
That was a moniker given to me by my husband when I really started getting deep into the field of the paranormal and investigating and research and things like that. Our children were younger, and he was getting a little perturbed with me because I was spending almost all my free time doing this kind of thing, investigating, going to haunted places, researching. And at one point, he said to me, "You're like a haunted housewife. There's a whole lot of haunted, but not a lot of housewife in it." And I just thought that was great. And I just ran with the name, and I copyrighted it. And here it is. Here I am.
What were the circumstances, Eric and Theresa, that brought the two of you together and led to the co-authoring of America's Most Haunted?
I was watching TV. I was doing a lot of writing at the time about, in particular, the various paranormal TV shows. In fact, that was kind of the door I went into. I had been very interested in ghosts and had some personal experiences when I was quite young, teenage and young adulthood, but had kind of put it to the side and done all kinds of other things. And then we were running a website, First Blog Critics, and another one called the Morton Report, and doing a lot of TV coverage. And then I kind of ran across these shows. I didn't even really know they existed, where they were taking seriously the idea of investigating paranormal locations and all the various shows, Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, etc. And then a show came on that Zach Bagans put together. So I watched it, and then here was this group, Haunted Housewives, and there were three of them, and they were in Waverly, and they're from Cleveland. Amazing, fascinating. And Teresa's team was really good and wow, very knowledgeable and brave. And they went into all these dark, scary places and they won the competition. I said, I want to interview them. So I did. And then it was really fun and interesting. And I liked the combination of kind of vivid personalities, but taking it very seriously. And boy, I really was out of my depth, certainly at the beginning, because I had no idea it was that serious and there were so many levels and that it was something that was done with a lot of rigor and there's equipment involved and personal experience as well. And so kind of one thing led to another, and I'm always looking for new projects, especially about writing, and I had already done few books at that point. And I looked around and I thought, there's no real serious but fun book that looks into what the best, most interesting paranormal locations. I think there was one that had like 100 locations and it was super breezy, just too short. I wanted to get into a lot more depth. So Teresa and I talked about it. I thought she would be a really great partner, someone with a lot of expertise and experience. And we worked very hard and we did some original investigations. We relied a lot on Teresa's previous investigations and her experience and her perspective. And I think that comes through in the book very well. And I, anyway, am very proud of the result.
Since each state has a myriad of haunted hotspots, how did you go about deciding which of those sites would be included in your book?
That was easy since Eric actually came up with the name, the title, America's Most Haunted, which gave us a direction to go. So, what are the most haunted places in America? And that was really easy because they were the haunted places that I decided were the most haunted places. But I stand behind every single one that's in the book. There were so many, like Eric said, there had been books written about places which would give a little blurb or a couple paragraphs of the story or maybe a little anecdote of something that happened, but there really wasn't anything that went in depth. And besides my expertise or experience in investigating, I also consider myself a historical researcher. So I wanted to focus on places that had interesting history, places that had a maybe a haunted reputation, but was that reputation really, was it called for? Was it just rumor or were there facts behind it? Does the history really support those allegations of hauntings? So I kind of looked for a little bit of that. Was it well known? Although there are especially one place in the book that is not very well known, but it still deserved to be there. But what is the history behind it? What is the legend of the history behind it? And what is the true history? Like, what could we back up with not just stories? Oh, somebody said this and somebody saw that. So that's how we narrowed it down. And I wanted to kind of give a little sprinkling of places across the United States and places that I had either been personally or ones that I could go to. Eric and I, we did investigate together, one of them, or places that I knew somebody that I trusted with all my being and their firsthand experiences. So that's how we narrowed down the 10. I would stand behind every single one of them as being extremely haunted under any sort of microscope that you would look at these places.
The infamous death tunnel, also known as the Body Chute, is in the abandoned Waverly Hill Sanitarium located in Louisville, Kentucky, and it's considered by many paranormal investigators to be one of the most haunted hospitals in the eastern US. Why is that?
Waverly Hills was a place that we were sent to on Paranormal Challenge. The story, that's where Eric had seen me on TV. And when we were contacted by the production company, they didn't tell us where we were going. We were selected, we were personally selected supposedly by Zach Baggins, since he was the one who was producing the show. He had heard about us and he had asked for the Haunted Housewives to be on the show, which was great. And they didn't tell us where we were going. And it was interesting because the first place they were going to send us, logistically, it didn't work out. My partner couldn't be there, and that was going to be a place that's in Ohio. And I was really glad we didn't get that place because we had been there so many times. So they ended up sending us to Waverly Hills, and we didn't know until literally the day before we left. We were like, well, we need to know where we're going and we need to tell our families. But Waverly has such a long history, starting off as a tuberculosis hospital, and it went through a lot of changes. And if you know anything about tuberculosis hospitals, they had to be away from the general public. They were usually somewhere up on a hill where you could get a lot of fresh air. They were self contained communities because the people who worked there really couldn't leave because tuberculosis was so contagious. So when you think about not just the people that were there as patients, but the doctors and nurses and custodians and people who worked there also were kind of confined to this place. And so over several decades, the rumor was there were 50, I think they said 55,000 deaths, which of course, during our research, we found that was absolutely not true. It wasn't even possible for there to be that many deaths. There were plenty of deaths. There were well over 5,000, but there were not 50,000. And that was the legend. And that's one of the reasons we put it in the book, because I wanted to find out exactly how many there were. But it was closed after the introduction of antibiotics that really made tuberculosis a non-entity in Western cultures. It's still very prevalent in other parts of the world, but and then the building itself became an old age home, and the sadness continued there. I mean, it was just another place of despair and death after that. So it was a very famous place because of everything that happened. It was supposed to be a place of healing and hope, and it became a place of despair and loneliness for many, not just the patients, but even the people who worked there. So it had an interesting history. And I think that attracted everybody who's interested in history and anybody who's certainly interested in the paranormal or ghosts. So it was definitely on my bucket list. And I was thrilled that we were sent there to investigate on national television. It was wonderful. And it absolutely ended up in the book because of it.
And don't forget, Theresa, you are actually in the death tunnel.
On TV, that was one of we did 3 days of shooting for about 20 minutes of what you actually see on TV. But I actually went into the death tunnel by myself without a flashlight. They didn't give us any flashlights, which was crazy. I'm like, we can't see where we're going. I thought I was going to die. The tunnel is like 495 feet going down steps. And luckily, I had been down there during the day. I saw it in the daylight. So I actually counted how many steps there were per station so I wouldn't trip and fall and kill myself. But the death tunnel was interesting. Again, we sorted rumors from facts about the death tunnel. And I did have an incredible paranormal experience there, which was really, really interesting. So, yeah, that was very memorable for sure.
Spirits of hundreds of lost souls are said to walk the decks of the Majestic Queen Mary and haunt certain specific areas on the ship, which is now docked in Long Beach, California, and operates as a hotel. Could you tell me about some of those restless spirits?
This is the one location that, besides the place that Eric and I went to ourselves to investigate, Eric actually had an experience there himself. So it was really cool that we could both put our experiences together on this. And the Queen Mary, it was a luxury liner that was taken the wealthiest of the wealthy all across Europe. And it was, think Titanic. It was a beautiful, beautiful place. But then during World War II, it was commandeered into become a ship for troops. And they painted it gray and they took out most of the luxury amenities and it became a warship. And it did have, unfortunately, one collision, one little accident where the boat that it ran into was the worse for wear for that one. The Queen Mary, being the bigger ship, had minimal damage, but the ship that it ran into, the Curacoa, unfortunately had many, many deaths. And since this was during the war, they were told not to stop for anything because that would make them a target of Japanese torpedo submarines. So they knew they hit the ship. It was an accident how they hit it, both Allied ships, but they couldn't stop. So imagine that, just leaving, I think 270 something men dying in the water that were on the Curacao. Those deaths, I think, are still attached to the Queen Mary, even though it happened on another ship. Then there were deaths that happened in the ship. One was a soldier who worked in the engine room, and he's one of the famous goats on the Queen Mary. They call his nickname is Half Hatch Harry, but his real name, I believe, is John Petter. And he was caught between the watertight doors as they were closing and unfortunately got smushed and smashed. But there are also spirits that roam it from when it was the luxury liner. There's supposed to be a child spirit that haunts the swimming pool area, which is one that my haunted housewife partner and I investigated when we were there. And we did end up hearing a little girl's voice in the pool area, which was really, really interesting. Although we could not find any documentation that a little girl had actually drowned in the pool. But we did get some paranormal evidence, as you would say, about that happening. So it's hard to know because not everything gets documented. You don't know, but it just besides the passengers, the soldiers, they brought a lot of war brides back after the war or towards the end of the war, and a lot of sad stories. So a lot of opulence and happiness and a lot of sadness on the Queen Mary. And I'm glad that they've preserved that history and that it's still open to the public because it was in danger of being closed down for good. Eric and I had a podcast too leading up to the release of the book, and we interviewed people that were heavily involved in trying to save the Queen Mary, and they did, at least for now.
It's another one of those haunted attractions that has a haunted attraction. And as the Ohio State Reformatory, and it's a real moneymaker. So what I envision, because I get interested kind of in the layers of these things and this philosophy is, so when you're going through there and you're encountering scare actors and all these scenarios, is any of it ever real?
The city of Willoughby, Ohio, has a number of haunted sites. One of the most famous being the Willoughby Coal Building, where several spirits have been seen roaming its halls and visitors reporting strange and eerie experiences. Can you expand on some of the ghostly happenings that have occurred there?
So Willoughby Coal is the one place that's the most local place to us in Ohio, although the Ohio State Reformatory is still in our state. Willoughby is our local haunt. It is such an iconic building. It is such a great history. And I decided to put it in the book, and Eric agreed. It is not one of the famous places. Again, that's the one place that, unless you're from the area, you probably had never heard of. But does it deserve to be on the list of the most haunted places in the United States? Absolutely. I believe it absolutely does. I've had incredible experiences there. I actually work for a local ghost walk, the Willoughby Ghost Walk, that is run by my ghost hunting partner, Kathy Weber. And we have been doing this for 17 years. I've been with her for 14, almost 15 years as a guide, but we have investigated that place hundreds of times. It's iconic. And we actually had our book release party there for America's Most Haunted, which was incredible because things were happening even during the party. Because it's a place by a railroad track, and I think a lot of it has to do with the comings and goings of the area. It seems to be like a byway for spirits. There's also a river that runs right outside of it. But the coal company was so important to the area that relied on coal for fuel and for heat and for cooking and for everything. So it was the heart of the community. And even though they don't sell coal anymore, it has kept the name Willoughby Coal as a tribute to how important it was for the community. And I believe that most of the spirits there have been there since the property was up, maybe even before the coal building itself was there. And there was a suspicious death that we believe was a murder that happened in the building. And that is the most prominent spirit there. And that is the spirit of Don Norris, who was thrown or fell out a third-story window. And if you knew the layout of the building, you would see it would be almost impossible for him to accidentally fall out that window. But that was the official account. And my many, 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 many investigations of Willoughby Coal, I believe I've encountered the spirit of Don Norris many times. And we have asked him, what happened to you? And the response we got was murdered. And even when we asked him, who is responsible for your death? We got an EVP back that said it was Henry, and Henry Windus was his partner, who we believe had something to do with his death. He's not alone there. Don Norris has a lot of company with different spirits in there. And we talk about several of them in the book. We're piling up more and more every year. There just seems to be more spirits coming and going in that place. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. A local treasure for sure.
Did we decide that the Underground Railroad was involved, had gone through there?
They don't keep documentation. But we did have two different psychics comment on another spirit at Willoughby Coal that is the spirit of a dog. And what's interesting is the dog that actually did pass away there was in the 80s, 1980s. But the one psychic said that there were an African American slave, older man, and a younger boy that were hiding in the building, and they were afraid of the dog, which was from the 1980s, not the 1880s. So these spirits supposedly could see this other spirit from 100 years difference, and they were aware of our presence because on the ghost walk we dress up. I wear it looks like Civil War attire with a lantern and the long poofy dresses and all that. So we don't know for sure, but we wouldn't be surprised considering its location and its proximity to not only the railroad but the river and how close we are to Canada. There's a very good chance it was part of the Underground Railroad, but again, we cannot prove that.
Ohio State Reformatory is a historic prison in Mansfield, Ohio, and it has been said a number of trapped souls remain imprisoned there. Can you expand a bit about those trapped souls?
Ohio State Reformatory is definitely the most famous and most haunted place, in my opinion, in Ohio. I've been there many times. I actually worked as a volunteer in the archives office for 2 seasons. Eric has been there several times as well. We did extensive research for the book on different happenings there. I believe that there are plenty of souls there, not just prisoners, but I believe there's the spirit of the one of the warden's wives who was accidentally shot and ended up passing away while she was living there. I don't know if I actually believe in the idea of a soul being trapped. I believe maybe some of their energy is left behind. I think that maybe it's some of these, especially the souls or the spirits of these prisoners, it's their unwillingness to move on, maybe because they don't want to go towards what's next after they die. Maybe they're afraid of their judgment. I don't know, but we've had so many experiences there. And that is definitely one of the few places I can honestly say that there is something very, very negative, evil, even. I don't want to say demonic, but definitely very bad, very scary, not to be taken lightly. It is also the place I had one of my very most profound paranormal experiences where I actually was grabbed, my hair was grabbed and pulled because of the location of where I was at the time. This spirit, I believe, that pulled my hair back. If it had decided to push me forward instead of pull me back, I could have fallen down a set of stairs and easily been very, very hurt. So that was kind of a wake up call. That was very early in my formal investigation years. And that really made me think twice about places I go and things I do. And also, there was a very nasty spirit that attached itself to my partner, Kathy, and followed her for years. And he was a very bad soul. And this is all, we talk about this extensively in the book, but we did a lot of research. We found out more rumors and facts and things. And Eric has been there many times. I'm sure he can talk about things he knows about the place because there's no shortage of stories for sure.
Yeah, it's a fascinating place, and it brings up one of the concepts that we got into. We were trying to, while we're going along, telling the stories, giving the background, trying to dig into the actual historical, looking at newspaper accounts, etc., while we were trying to give a well-rounded, kind of holistic view of these places. One of the theories or one of the concepts we came across is this idea of kind of like a critical mass being reached, where that once there are spirits attached or there's energy attached to a place, then that seems to function in some ways like a magnet and draw others to it. And then on top of that, when you have people coming through, so these are all the places in the book are either public or at least semi-public, so that there are people coming through. And once these places get these reputations, and in many cases, it's literally becomes a business to bring people in to tour or do investigations or both, then I think you also start drawing from people who visit. And I think, in my mind anyway, there's definitely something to the notion of psychic energy building upon itself, growing, feeding, drawing more to it. And it's basically a physical, it's some sort of physical activity. And it reminds me of, and yet another concept we looked into, I think in conjunction with the Stanley, which is the piezoelectric effect. And that is physical, but usually it's in geology, rocks, various substances, natural substances can actually store energy, be like a battery, store energy within them. And then at some point they are triggered and put that energy out or release that energy. So I think that's one of the things going on also at the Ohio State Reformatory, because it is so well known. There are so many people coming through, and possibly even from the seasonal, the Halloween haunted attraction aspect of it. People come in, they expect to see things. Their minds are geared toward seeing things. And I think that not only does that make you more susceptible to seeing things that perhaps you are projecting, but it also makes you more susceptible to seeing things that really are there or that drawing out. So we don't know these mechanisms. Remember, magic is just science before we know what the underlying mechanisms are. And I think we're at a point where it's a very interesting phase early on in the treating the paranormal as a science. And that was one of the things we really did try to tap into. Sure, these stories are great. We love stories. We're storytellers. We love stories. Stories are very fundamental, mythic, fundamental part of being human and human communication. But we were also really trying to get into the actual scientific, where we could find it, objective reality of these things. And that's why we tried to interview as many different people as we could, besides our own personal experiences. And we tried to document the actual history of these places via newspaper accounts, contemporary interviews, etc. So yes, Ohio State Reformatory, we picked that as number one. I don't know if we ended up giving any sort of home state advantage to it. Theresa could probably tell you that, but it is certainly worthy of it. My main experience there, it's a lot of kind of creepy things, just that feeling, that back of your neck, which I've actually kind of come to trust. There's something that causes that. It's different from just anticipation. It's different from dread. There is something that actually triggers a physical reaction. My most vivid experience there is when you're standing in the cell blocks and you're looking up. How high is it? Like 5 levels? It is overwhelming to see it. And I was there in the day by myself one time, just looking around, poking around, and I looked up and there's a whole block, a whole wall of windows, and they're all half of them, at least when I was there, they're broken, they're dirty, they're whatever. But they're certainly shedding kind of a creepy light on all of this huge, massive 5-story layer of cell blocks. And at the very top layer, super, super distinct, vivid, humanoid shape, very dark shadow figure appeared on the railing, and I could see it move from the railing, super vivid, very much darker than the surrounding shadows of the place, and then kind of disappear into literally one of the cells. When I think about it now, it reminds me of Theresa's experience, the one we really did do together pretty extensively, which was the now, I guess it's shuttered, which is very sad, Bobby Mackey's Music World, which is just almost in Ohio. It's just south of Cincinnati. Theresa, you should tell us about that.
Oh yeah, Bobby Mackey's. It's a shame they closed down. But when we were down in the basement area of Bobby Mackey's, which was a honky tonk, so it was a bar, and that was the one that we wanted to go to decide if it was going to be in the book because I had heard all the rumors and all the stories, and I wasn't sure I believed it because the reputation was so extreme that I wasn't sure I believed it. But it was definitely within travel distance, and it was worth checking out. I had heard from people that I trust that yes, it's haunted. And then I had heard such crazy stories from other people. I was like, I don't know. We ended up putting in the book because of our personal experiences we had there. And the one we had was when we were in the basement, we were getting a little tour, and I saw a black, it was like a black man, looked like he had a hat. He stepped out of the shadows and it looked like he was looking right at us. I mean, it was clear yet not clear because I couldn't make out a face or anything. It was just the image of this black man or black outline of a man, but I could distinctly see that like he had a hat. I could see his size, and we knew for a fact that there was nobody in that area, and that did correspond with reports that other people have had down there. Now, their main story was that there was a portal to hell in the basement, which was very disappointing when we actually saw it. It was basically a big hole that was a couple feet deep, and it was cordoned off with a little wooden barrier, but it was kind of like wah, wah. So I'm not wasn't buying into the story that it was a portal to hell, but is it haunted? Absolutely. I truly believe that it was haunted just because that was just one of the experiences we had on top of the people we personally interviewed and talked to face. What Matt told us about, Matt was a gentleman who worked there, and he had worked there for years, and he was a big man, not a small guy. And he said he was like thrown across the room by something. And when he was telling us, when you look in their eyes, I think I'm pretty good about can telling people are BSing me or if they're telling the truth. And I believed him. He was scared. He was scared retelling the story. So they're going to rebuild Bobby Mackey's. I don't think it's going to be on that site. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm wondering where all the artifacts from that place are because it was before it was a honky tonk. It was a like a supper club. It was speakeasy and a gambling joint, and they had some of the original artifacts there. So it'll be interesting to see. But that was one where the rumors were so extreme. And even though we pretty much debunked a lot of the stories that make the place well known, there was no doubt that there was still paranormal activity happening there.
Countless reports of ghostly activity has been reported at the 1860s 33-room Lemp mansion in downtown St. Louis, Missouri. It has even been said that the mansion is cursed and possessed. What happened there that resulted in it getting that reputation?
The Lemp Mansion, one of my very favorite places to go. And once we got the book deal, this is what I spent my advance on. I took a trip down to the Lemp Mansion with Kathy because I so wanted it to live up to its reputation because it was so interesting to me. And it did. And it definitely made it in the book. The Lemp Mansion was basically a home for the Lemp family. And there was a family of German immigrants who had come over to start a brewery. To make long story short, they started a brewery. It was very, very successful, and it was handed down from father to son. And by the second generation, going into the third generation, Prohibition hit. And after Prohibition hit, the place, it never recovered from it, basically. But the reason it was so successful, and while there's a lot of breweries in St. Louis, Missouri, is because of the geological delights that they have in that area. There is a cave system that is actually under the Lemp Mansion. In fact, they built a tunnel from the mansion, which is where the family lived, to these huge, and I'm talking huge caves, not like a cave you crawl into, one that you could build different, you could build a ballroom in a church and a dance, you could drive cars to it. Big underground caves. The beauty of the cave was that it was at a set temperature and it was perfect for storing the beer. So beer was no longer just a seasonal drink. They could store it. And the breweries of St. Louis took advantage of this, which is why it became so successful. Now, the Lemp family was said to be cursed because of all the tragedy that seemed to follow them. There were several suicides and one suspicious death, all in two generations of the Lemp family. The son of the original owner of the Lemp Mansion, he committed suicide. He was distraught over many things, over business and things like that. And also the death of his best friend, yet rival, was the Anheuser-Busch. The head of that brewery was a very, very good friend of his. And when he died, he kind of slipped into a depression, plus things that were happening. So he shot himself and killed himself in the Lemp Mansion. His son, years later, committed suicide the same way in the same room. A daughter also committed suicide, also in the mansion. And then there was another one, the only one that left a note. And this was the last one, Charles Lemp. And he said, he left a note saying, blame no one but me for my death. But the tragedy just continued. I think after the prohibition, when prohibition was lifted and they tried to get back to their former glory, it was just impossible. Techniques had changed. Other breweries had adapted where the Lemps did not adapt to different ways of brewing and different ways of running their business. And when Billy Lemp, the grandson, took his life, it was because he failed. He failed to keep the business going. Plus, there was a lot of issues with his wife. It was a big scandal with his wife. So they all had personal reasons for committing suicide, but it's strange for one family to have that many deaths, unexplained deaths, suicides within just a couple generations, all on the same property. Now, with the Lemp Mansion, the big rumor for the Lemp Mansion was the story of Zeke, who was supposed to be the illegitimate son of Billy Lemp, who was hidden away in the attic. Because back in the early 1900s, to have someone who had any sort of a mental or physical disability was thought shameful, and those people were hidden away. And the big ghost there was supposed to be this Zeke, and he had terrible nickname. They called him the monkey face boy, and all these horrible thoughts. And that's what fascinated me about the Lemp Mansion. And when I went down there, I wanted to find out the story of Zeke because I couldn't find any documentation that I couldn't find a birth certificate or a death certificate or schooling, or I couldn't find anything. And when Kathy and I went down there to spend a weekend to investigate and to talk to people about it, I tracked the origin of the story of Zeke to a psychic who said she was told by the ghost of Billy Lemp that Zeke was their son. And I was like, okay. There was another incident in the book that happened. The story started from a psychic's impression, but there was no evidence at all that this child existed, except for the fact that people see him, that people hear him, they communicate with him. her version of how she could prove that Zeke existed was she took us up in the attic and showed us the place where the floor was kind of worn. And she said, well, that's from him walking back and forth, trying to get people's attention, looking out in the street. And I'm like, that's not enough for me. She also said that there was an unmarked stone in the Lemp graveyard in their personal burial plot. And I think that that is just a stone in the cemetery. I don't even think it's a grave, but that's what she insisted. Now, maybe there was a Zeke. I couldn't find any evidence at all, but there have been so many paranormal investigators that have either seen something that resembles the description that they get about Zeke, or they've picked up EVPs, electronic voice phenomenon, of voices saying, I am Zeke. So something's going on. Was there a Zeke? I don't think so. But are there spirits that are like, you want to talk to Zeke? I'll be Zeke. And they just answer to this. So that's what I think is going on. But that place was just amazing. The Lemp family were incredible. And the family that has fixed up the mansion, they saved it after the brewery closed down and the Lemps moved out. It became like a boarding house and it fell into disrepair. And now it's a beautiful, it's like a little inn, like a bed and breakfast, a little hotel. They have lots of different events there. They have a wonderful restaurant. It's absolutely beautiful. And you could see the eccentricities of the family from the furniture and some of the things that they have there. There's a glass shower, glass and gold in the middle of a bathroom. Whereas if you were to shower in this bathroom, you would be on public display because it's right there in the middle. Amazing things. But that was such a joy to investigate, to find out, to actually track down, is this true? Is this not true? What's really going on? And that was like our whole purpose with this book, to separate fact from fiction, but still, is it haunted? Oh, yeah, it's haunted. It's definitely haunted. We had some crazy experiences there. So I believe it's haunted. Is it haunted by an illegitimate child of the Lemps? I don't believe so, but there's something there for sure.
When Theresa and Eric, you investigate a site that is reputed to be haunted, how do you go about protecting yourselves and others who might be with you from malevolent spirits?
I learned by trial and error how to prepare to go into a haunted location because at first it's been around me all my life. And since I was a little girl, and it wasn't formal investigating, it was more snooping around and looking into things and being places I wasn't supposed to be and things like that. But as I got older and I realized it wasn't just interesting and thrilling, that it could actually affect me. It could be possibly harmful, like when I had my hair pulled at the Ohio State Reformatory. And even before then, before I had hooked up with Kathy Weber, before I met Eric, when I was part of a paranormal investigation team, and they were Christian and they believed in the power of prayer. And I was Christian, I was Catholic, I still am, and I believe in the power of prayer. But it was when we did a residential investigation, just people had contacted us. We were part of the Taps family, which was the ghost hunters, their home team in Rhode Island. We would get calls to do, when they would get calls to do a home investigation in our area, they would tell us about it because they're not going to come from Rhode Island to Ohio unless it's going to be on TV. So it was that kind of relationship. But we did a home investigation and it was really unremarkable. It wasn't that interesting. We really couldn't find things that were going on. And the family insisted that there was something bad, something really evil. And they were having nightmares and they were hearing voices and all these things. We couldn't capture any evidence or any experiences that happened, but you just got a feeling. You got this horrible feeling. And I didn't prepare. I didn't cleanse. I didn't do any sort of ritual before, which is just praying and just cleansing yourself of negative energy and negative thoughts and asking for protection. And sometimes you can use holy water or anointed oil or salt or different things before and after. And I didn't bother to do that because I thought, I'll just say a prayer later. And I came home the next day. And from that time, I was tormented. Something followed me home from that investigation. I was having not nightmares, night terrors. I was physically ill. My personality changed. My husband was so upset with me. He didn't know what was happening with me. He said I was a totally different person. I felt sick. I had a run of bad luck that cannot be explained, with things happening with my car and losing things and getting hurt. The kids were affected. And I was hearing voices. I was hearing what I thought to be horrible demonic voices. It was absolutely horrible. And I was terrified. And strangely enough, when we contacted the family whose house we had investigated, they said, it's really weird. After you guys left, nothing happened. Everything's been really quiet. So I think whatever was negative there hooked onto me and followed me home. And it took me forever to get rid of it. And I prayed it away, but it took forever. And I really had to come back to my faith strong and really ask God for protection and promise to never take it for granted again. And so now I will prepare myself before I go into any haunted location, whether it's benign or something that could be happy. And like we have beautiful haunted places here, a place called the Steel Mansion, which is gorgeous, beautiful. Nothing negative happens there, but it's haunted. Even before I go into a place like that, I make sure that I'm prepared. I make sure that I'm in the right frame of mind, that I don't have anything negative that's weighing me down. And I pray for protection, because it's no joke. Between that, what happened to me at the Ohio State Reformatory, and another place that we had a negative experience was the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. You can't take that for granted. I brought that home to me. And I had 2 children at the time. I didn't have my third, but I had 2 young children at home with me at the time. And it put a wedge between me and my husband for a while. It was terrible. So you can't take it for granted. I lean on my faith. Other people have other rituals, but for me, it's my faith and different rituals, but they're not like witchy rituals. They're just rituals that I do to make sure I'm in a frame of mind, meditation, praying, cleansing. But yeah, you can't take that stuff for granted, because it's fun and games until someone gets hurt.
Should viewers of Paranormal Yakker want to buy America's Most Haunted, The Secrets of Famous Paranormal Places, how can they do that?
You can get it on Amazon.
Yes, Amazon. It's still in print, which is great. We're excited about that. After 11 years? That's very unusual. It was also, we'll pat ourselves on the back when the Travel Channel did a survey of the highest rated paranormal book of all time. America's Most Haunted was rated #1. That was a big deal. Any of the online sites, obviously Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Walmart, it's still in print. It's available there.
Theresa Argie and Eric Olsen, I thank you for being my guest on Paranormal Yakker. Yakking with the two of you has been a wonderful experience. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Hi, everyone. This is Stan Mallow, the Paranormal Yakker. I hope you enjoyed the interview you just watched. So that you don't miss any upcoming shows, be sure to subscribe to my free YouTube channel. To do that, just press the subscribe button on your screen.